Hello again. So tonight I'm brewing a oatmeal stout. Now, whenever you're brewing a dark beer, you have to drink a dark beer. That's the law, right? I'm pretty sure I heard that somewhere. Anyway, so this is out the Beer 52 box. It's a Yeasty Boys Shadow of the Dog Dunkelweizen. Mahogany, biscuit, malty, banana, clove, and refreshing, apparently. So I'll get that into a glass and we'll have a little chat about the recipe. I'll do this as a grain to glass video, so you'll see the finished result at the end. Oh, and the beer's called, which you'll know by the title already, but is called Oaty McOatface. So, yeah. Right, so, yeah, I'm currently about halfway through the boil at the moment. I've just noticed you can actually see the chiller in the background there, so you know that that's not gone in yet. So I've got a little while to do this, and then we'll be cooling it down. I'll do some brew footage afterwards. Here's the Dunkelweizen that I just showed you, so the Yeasty Boys can. It does smell very nice, I've got to say. So yeah, I'm not going to review that, but first impressions, very good. So yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, oatmeal stout. Let's talk about the recipe first of all. The basis for this was from the, what's it called? Brewing Classic Styles book. So if you haven't had a look at that book yet, it's well worth checking out. There's just really good base recipes for, well, as it says, classic styles basically. And even if you modify them slightly, they're still a really good starting point. I modified the recipe here. The book has sort of tips and stuff, particular styles on how to do things, a couple of which I've used with this one. So let's have a look at the recipe and I'll explain what those little things were that we did differently. So grist Maris Otter base, it's 3.45 kilos of Maris Otter. Then obviously it's an oatmeal stout, so we've got quite a lot of oats in there. I've bumped up the content of oats slightly by using some golden naked oats as well as normal flaked oats. And as per the recommendation of the book, I've also slightly toasted the oats in the oven, as you will see in the footage coming up. So it was about 150 degrees Celsius. That's I think about 300 Fahrenheit for, I did about an hour in the end. I got a bit bored, to be honest, of waiting for them to be ready, and I needed to put the mash on, so they may have benefited from a little bit longer to get a bit more colour on them, but they were smelling really good and they were starting to take on a little bit more of a or some of them at least were taking on a bit more of a golden colour. So I took them out after about an hour, sort of doing 15-minute stops to mix them up a bit and shake them around, so they tried to get a bit of even colour on them. So the flaked oats were toasted in the oven, the golden naked oats were put in with the rest of the grist as per normal. I had 500 grams of the flaked oats, which were toasted, 250 grams of the golden naked oats. They're Simpsons ones, I think they've got trademark on that, I believe, so they're really good if you haven't tried them. Then we've got 220 grams of biscuit malt, or I think Victory malt it's called in the US, or something similar to that anyway. We've got some pale chocolate malt. I didn't actually have as much pale chocolate malt as I was expecting, so in the end I think I used about half and half pale chocolate malt and normal chocolate malt, but it's 220 grams in total. So 220 grams of chocolate malt, and then 150 EBC crystal malt, 170 grams of that. And just to finish off, a little bit more dark malt, so we've got some roasted barley in there. You've got to have some roasted barley if it's stout, so 170 grams of that as well. Hopping wise, very, very straightforward. 40 grams of Goldings, East Kent Goldings at 60 minutes, and that's it. I was tempted to throw in a little last edition of EKG, but I just stuck with the recipe as per the book in the end and went for that. So in Brewing Classic Styles, it recommends using WLP 002, which is the supposedly the fuller's yeast. mainly because it should give you a fairly high starting gravity. Personally, I've always found with that yeast that it actually finishes a lot lower than it's supposed to, according to the gravity predictions. It's not as low in attenuation, for me anyway, as what it says on the packet. But I'm not using that one anyway because I had some London Ale Free, which I've used in the White Shield brew that I did, and I basically collected a load of slurry off of that brew. I only kegged that like a week ago, so it's fairly fresh. I've got a jar of that out of the fridge ready to go, and I'm just going to pitch that straight in, so I'm not bothering with a start or anything. So it's London Ale Free, second generation slurry yeast going into it. So vital statistics, it's a 19 litre batch, 75% brew house efficiency, I hope. We'll see if it actually gets up to that in a minute. It's 1058 predicted gravity, 35 IBUs. It should come out around about 5.7% depending on how low it finishes. The predicted finishing gravity is, bear with me, 1015. Yeah, so that should give us 5.7 if it gets down to that. The only other thing to mention is water. So I have gone for a combination of tap water, which the Bedford water here is fairly hard, but I've basically cut that 50% dilution with RO water, which gives me a fairly nice starting point in terms of the water profile for a stout, and basically gets it into the region where the pH is going to sort itself out and I don't really have to add any acid. I've added a little bit of calcium chloride back into that just to bring up the chloride levels, so it's not quite 2-to-1 but close enough, 2-to-1 sort of chloride to sulfate ratio, which should favour the kind of malt and body in this sort of beer, which is what we're kind of looking for with an oatmeal stout. And as I said, yeah, the pH should sort itself out, so we end up with a water profile of 86 calcium, 5 magnesium, 30 sodium, 65 sulfate, and 97 chloride. Yeah, and enough bicarbonate, as I said, to balance the dark malts and give you a pH which should fall somewhere around about 5.3 to 5.4. according to Brewing Water. We'll see. I don't know if I'm going to actually bother measuring the pH. I kind of can't be arsed with that, to be honest, most of these days, so I kind of rely on the software and it seems to fall in that window anyway. So that's it. Yeah, I haven't actually done that much brewing footage so far. I'll try and get a bit more as we go on, but let's cut to some brewing footage and then a little tasting at the end.
Okay, so here we have the finished products, looking pretty nice in the glass, I must say. So we've got a pretty much jet black beer there. There's no real colour shining through in the bottom of the glass at all. A thick, creamy, kind of just off white head. The head retention is reasonably good. It does drop a bit over time, but it's yeah, the oats have definitely sort of had their effect there in terms of the head retention and the thickness and the creaminess of the foam on the top. And yeah, as far as the brew went, it was all pretty straightforward. The gravity was a touch under what I was expecting, so it was 1055 instead of 1058, I think the target was, so dropped a few points there, probably just down to the mash being a little bit thicker from the oats that were in there, so it may have been a little bit less efficient from that, but it came out 5.4% ABV in the end, which I think was just 0.3 of a percentage point under what we were looking at in terms of the original recipe. So no real issue there, to be honest, and the beer hasn't suffered for it. So it was a nice easy brew, nothing too complicated going on with this one. And yeah, let's see what the finished result has come out like. So aroma wise, we have definitely a lot of the oatmeal coming through there, so I do get a kind of, it's weird to describe an aroma as creamy, but there is almost a sort of creamy oatmeal cookie type thing going on there, a little bit chocolatey maybe, not so much of the really strong kind of roast malt notes there, but yeah, smells pretty good. And let's go for a tasting on this. Okay, so it's very smooth drinking. It does go down pretty easy. I think this is maybe a little bit colder than I could do with having it at the moment. Apologies if you're getting a little bit of wind noise coming through. We've got another storm blowing through this weekend over in the UK, so this is a good time to be drinking a nice dark beer. Keep the cold out. So it's got a nice mouthfeel to it. The oats have given it that kind of quite silky smooth feel in the mouth, and it's as I said, is very easy drinking. There is fairly firm bitterness to it on the end there, so it was just bittering hops I added to this one. There were no aroma hops, but the IBUs were still up around 35, I think, so that is there. It's maybe not as sweet as I would have liked it, so I could probably maybe tweak this recipe a bit in terms of going for maybe a higher mash temperature, perhaps, just to try and push the final gravity up a little bit, or maybe put a little bit more caramel malt into it. I'm not sure how much, you know, sweetness you need specifically for an oatmeal stout in terms of the style guidelines, but I think for my own taste, I'd maybe like a little bit more of that, and with that sweetness, maybe just a touch more body to it as well. So, I mean, it's certainly not thin, but I think when I'm thinking about an oatmeal stout, I want something that's quite, you know, fairly thick and quite a big body on the beer, or at least that's what I would like to have in it as well. So one obvious way to do that maybe would just be to really crank the oats up, and that would obviously give you even more oatmeal flavour as well. I think it is there, the oats on this one, but I think you could go a little bit heavier still and really push that, and then obviously get a bit more maybe body from that as well too, or you could add something else into it, so maybe go a bit more traditional and put some flaked barley in as you would with a normal stout, something like that perhaps. Maybe just dropping the bittering down a touch might help with that as well. So those are a few tweaks that I might make to this recipe, but overall it's come out pretty well and I'm quite pleased with that. So I think toasting the oats was definitely worthwhile. I think that does add a little bit more of that oaty kind of flavour and aroma in there, just brings it out a little bit more. And yeah, I think the base recipe is a good one, definitely a good starting point. The yeast that I used in this, the London Ale Free 1318, which I mentioned before, is quite commonly used for NEPAs and so on. I think there maybe is a touch of fruitiness. There's a little bit of a sort of fruity ester coming through on there. I don't think that's a bad thing, but perhaps, you know, maybe if you're not wanting that in your stout, you might go with something a little bit cleaner or just a more malt forward yeast, as opposed to something that's maybe going to put a little bit of that fruitiness in as well. So I think it works okay, but that's something that I might just try a different yeast to see what sort of effect that has, and maybe again just make it a little bit more focused on the malt. But yeah, overall very nice. So cheers everyone, and see you soon. By the way, new t-shirt, hope you like the new apparel, and yeah, got a few stickers and stuff like that as well. So if anyone wants to do beer mail swaps and things like that, you might get a sticker added into the box if you do that soon. So speak to you soon.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness, or duder, or you know, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.